Hey you mob, let's talk about. In a previous let's talk about, we touched on our favourite decades and why. So I thought it might be fun. I've compiled a list of things that were very prominent in the 70s that you just don't really see now. And I thought it might spark some conversation and debate. So the first thing, who remembers the 3-day week electricity cuts? In the 70s, I lived in a council house in Ulverston. Before I went to a boarding school, I lived with my father. And I remember so often the electricity going out and us having to get the long white tallow candles out and light the candles. We had a coal fire, and the fire was the main source of lighting as well as heat. And regularly there'd be no electricity. Sometimes it was for a couple of hours. Sometimes in my memory, I don't know if this is right or not, but it seemed to be off pretty much all day and all night. So yeah, the electricity cuts in the 70s, they were terrible. Black and white TV. I can remember when, excuse me, talking, itchy nose, it's a thing. I remember when the coloured televisions came out. My dad wouldn't have one because he thought they caused brain tumours. There was a rumour that they caused brain tumours. And he wouldn't, I mean, we never had a black and white television for years. And then we got one, but he wouldn't have a coloured television for a long time. The TV shutting down overnight and the test card with the clown, the little girl with the chalkboard and the clown. Oh, it was classic. I thought she was disabled. I always thought that little girl couldn't walk for some reason. Whether she could or not, I don't know. But I always had it in my head that she was a disabled girl. I think the telly would go off about, excuse me, certainly before midnight. And that would just be it. You'd get the long beep of just black static and beep. And then after a while, the test card would come up, and it was a stripy card with a circle in the middle with a picture of a little girl with a blackboard and a clown doll. Quite creepy, but an iconic image of the 70s that everybody knows about. Only 3 channels. You had 3 choices to watch. BBC 1, BBC 2 and ITV. Even Channel 4 wasn't invented then. I can remember about 6 o'clock they'd put a kids programme on, a single kids programme, and it'd be something really naff like Captain Pugwash or Crystal Tips and Alistair. They were the 2 big ones. Excuse me, I've got a really itchy nose. It happens every time I speak for a prolonged period. They also used to put some kids programs on at about 1 o'clock, and it was called Watch with Mother. And it was a section of cartoons, and you had the Wooden Tops, Trumpton, Chigley, Andy Pandy. There were a few others, and it was called Watch with Mother. Very sexist, but then everything was sexist in the 70s. There you go. Misogyny and sexism in the 70s was huge. Smoking on buses, trains, planes, pubs and offices. Forget that, smoking everywhere. I remember going to the doctors I'd be 6. And it was an old man called Dr. Watson who had his doctor's surgery in his house, which was a thing in those days. It doesn't seem to happen these days. But you'd go to the doctor's house and he'd have a room set aside downstairs, 2 rooms, one for the waiting room and one for his consultancy. And old Dr. Watkins, he was an old man then, and he always had a fag in his hand. You know, he'd have a stethoscope in one hand and a fag in the other. And these days, you know, the matrons in the hospital, walking around the hospital smoking, patients smoking in bed in the hospitals. It was everywhere. Everybody smoked everywhere. Teachers in the classroom would light up a fag. Crazy. Cigarette vending machines in pubs. There was also, I used to live in Ulverston, and there was a little parade of shops, Crofland shops. And there was, for years, there was a cigarette machine there that sold 10 fags. And of course, there were no Kings or Super Kings in those days. They were about this big. And you got Capstan, Number 6, Embassy, Number 1, maybe. They might not have been invented then. Embassy, Regal. And oh, it was so cool to buy a packet of 10 fags and share them with your mates. Ashtrays built into public spaces everywhere. Everything had a hole for an ashtray, and we had those weird standy up ashtrays that you pressed a button and it had like a rotisserie under the like segments cut out, and a rotisserie piece of metal that had slot into place when you weren't using it, and you pushed the button and the metal would go around until the 2 holes aligned so that you could flick your cigarette ash into the ashtray. They were the bee's knees. The best houses had those. Rotary dial telephones. Again, we never had a telephone for years and years. In fact, I don't think we ever had. We never had a telephone. We had to go to the telephone box. Where was the nearest telephone box? Right at the end of Maple Avenue, we had a red telephone box. We never had a telephone. But there used to be these great big baker-like things with the round dial. And you have to wait for every number to go all the way back. Shared party phone lines. The operator would be in her little operating room, and she'd have all these things, and she'd pull a wire out of here and put it into here, and you'd be talking to somebody on the phone, and suddenly another voice would come in. You'd be talking to somebody else. Nothing was private. You know, you could be discussing the most intimate things, and suddenly this random stranger would break into your phone call with their phone call. It was very, very strange. Phone boxes used daily for real conversations. Excuse me. 2 pence. You put 2 pence in the slot. It later went up to 10 pence and 50 pence. Later it had 2 slots, but that wasn't until the 80s, I don't think. And you could either put in 10 pences or 50 pence. But originally there were 2 pence. I remember the big cup of 2 pence, and you'd get 2 or 3 minutes. Can't remember which. 3 minutes, I think, for your 2 pence. And when it was about to run out, it'd go beep, 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 and you'd have this big stack of coins on the shelf in the red telephone box, and a great queue of people outside, and you'd be saying, I've got to go, beep, 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 beep. Hang on, I'll just put another 2 pence in. You'd feed the 2 pence in and have to get the money in before it ran out. And very often it'd cut you off anyway. Shag pile carpets, mustard yellow shag pile carpets that all the food used to get trapped in, and you'd go into. My dad used to work in a pub at the end of the canal, and they had one, and there'd be people would drop bits of crisps and things into the pile and it'd be this long and horrible things.